welcome to the English Hour. In today's episode, we'll talk about a very contentious issue, and it relates to the nature and the future of college education. There is a debate around the world, and especially in the US, about the worthiness of college education. Some people argue that college education is not necessary to be successful in life, but others argue that college education is a part of a learned man's arsenal. So a man or a woman, in this case, needs college education to advance in personal and professional life. So here we are again with John Beck. So he's
Hello.
little ill today.
Strep throat.
Yeah, so I might be able to do more talking this time around. We'll see what happens. So, John Beck, what is your take on this issue? What do you think about college education or the question of whether it's worthy?
Okay, so when we first brought this topic before beginning the podcast, we were talking more in line with the professional benefits or disadvantages of a college education. There are actually more sides to it. Now I'm coming to the realization that this is a multifaceted subject for sure. And I was thinking you might be getting or losing a professional or financial benefit with your decision to go to university or not, but you're actually making a much more impactful decision for your life, because the cultural background, the cultural understanding that we were able to get from our college education, I'm thinking it was priceless.
It is. And
Really.
the thing is, I think this question should really be considered in relation to the culture and the country that you live in. For example,
That's right.
the debate on college education is very much heated in the United States, because in the US, colleges are very expensive, and the most prestigious colleges, universities, are generally private colleges, for example, Harvard, MIT. So if you plan on attending to Harvard, MIT, or to a middle-sized college, at the end of the college term, college education, you will have paid probably around somewhere between $200,000 to $300,000, and most students take out student loans to finance their education.
That's right.
And that means when they graduate with hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt, and the job market in the US was not very favorable in the past few years, but it's improving. So many people or many students argued that, well, instead of going into this much debt, maybe you can do something else with your life.
Yeah.
But in our case, for example, in the Turkish context, we have prestigious public universities that offer a great environment, a great education, and with little or no financial obligation, you can get a world-class education.
I would agree with that. Yeah. I mean, it's important that a country, a government is able to provide this type of service for their citizens. I mean, think about that. I wouldn't be able to go to university. With that much ease, definitely not. And I might not even be able to go to university, period, if I hadn't gotten the kind of scholarships that I did. And then, even before the scholarships, the education was free. If you go to a university like the Columbia University in New York, right?
Yeah.
You're looking at $40,000 almost per year for your education. Even this is before you start thinking about accommodation, about what you're going to eat, what you're going to wear, and all of these things. When you combine all of these things, you're talking about a ton of money that you can definitely think about investing in something completely different. You can even start a business, as we mentioned before. You know, you can, but you're not going to be given the credit for it. Now, that's the key. Here's the thing, right? In the case of getting a college education, like if you get college education, you are somebody who has invested a lot of time and effort into learning a craft, and you have somebody with a profession. So if you want to spend money, if you want to allocate or gather financial resources towards a goal, you will be given the opportunity in the system that you're living in. If you want credit for your business, for example, you'll be able to get it, even though you're in debt. You're in a lot of debt, but you still get credit because you get the trust of the system. However, if you're somebody who has no academic qualifications, you will not be treated the same way. So
that is true. I mean, I think in our case, things are a little different because both Canberk and I, we both graduated from Boğaziçi, which is one of the most prestigious schools in Turkey. And we had the opportunity to work with some great instructors, professors.
That's right. Exactly.
And it was a great opportunity to both improve ourselves and to learn more about the world, to network with people from all around the world, to read the articles and the text or textbooks that students in the American schools would read. So it gave us a unique perspective, and I think it provided us with a world-class education. So it really helped a lot, and in that respect, I think the college education has been very advantageous, very useful and worthy. So it's one of the main pros of college education. And I think, I mean, personally, so I'll first talk about my personal take on the pros of college education, and then maybe you can talk about yours, and we can then
cons.
Talk about the cons. So for me, I think I had different stages different stages of sort of appreciation for the importance of college. So when I first started college, like after a couple of years, I was like, well, this is great. It's helping me out a lot. I've learned a lot. I've become a different person. Like my whole academic or intellectual horizon sort of tripled, quadrupled. I don't know, like you can multiply it with any number you want. So it sort of went above and beyond what I expected. But then, say, when I started my graduate studies, like when I started my master's, I started feeling like, you know what, I think I could probably do everything that I am able to do right now without a college degree. I was like, well, I could read these books, I could watch these lectures, and I'd be fine. So I was being a little stubborn because I was like a little arrogant, I might say. I felt, well, I could do all of this on my own, given the resources and the books and everything.
Maybe a skeptic is...
Yeah, I was skeptical.
Yeah.
So that was a period in my life. And then a couple years later, then I think I grew more mature, and I started realizing, oh my God, it's not just about the books I read, the resources. It's about the connections I make. It's about the questions that we discuss in class. It's about the type of people that I get to talk to. Because, I mean, for example, when I'm sitting in a class at Boğaziçi, I have people who are brilliant around me. Like, I have people who have a lot of experience in a certain field, a lot of interest in a certain field, like who are basically the best in their field of expertise, especially in a master's or PhD class. And I was like, oh my God, like the discussions we're having in this class are incredibly valuable. And I would not be able to have those kinds of discussions on my own, just reading books in my corner, in my house. Like, I wouldn't be able to gain those insights on my own. So, and then I was enlightened. So that skepticism sort of went away. I was like, okay, there is room for like formal education in our system. There are definitely benefits of formal education. But then the tech landscape is changing and the nature of education is changing, and most schools started sort of offering online degrees, online programs, and right now you can access courses from the most prestigious schools online, generally for free, and it's I think a revolution of sorts. So I think that's my take right now. So what do you think? Like,
Well,
when it comes to pros, like the advantages.
yeah, I mean, college education has always had a different place. You know, in our case, in Turkey, for example, up to high school, it is obligatory to go to school. You have to do it. You don't have a choice. Before that, I think it was the primary and what we call middle school was obligatory. So
Yeah.
up to high school, you had to. And I mean, in our case, you know, we had to do it up until the end of high school. So we never questioned it. We never thought about it. It was just part of life. You just went to school. You came back from school. You did homework and whatnot. But college is different. College, we made a choice. And it was an important choice. We struggled for it. That university entrance exam is still, you know, it always makes headlines whenever it is announced, whenever it is held, after the results are announced. Every part of it is national news because it involves more than 1 million students each time. And that's a lot of lives at stake. And college education in Turkey context is definitely obligatory in today's day and age, because whatever you want to go into, if it's medicine, engineering, it could be dentistry, it could be psychology, sociology, it could be philosophy, it could be teaching, it could be anything, journalism, any other thing, you're gonna have to have a proper university degree to be able to do it. And you're not going to be, I mean, you're going to be knocking on doors, and those doors will not open for you if you don't have the right type of degree. You will not be recognized. No matter how knowledgeable you may be in your field, you're going to require that university degree, that bachelor's degree, to be able to do that.
I think that applies for some fields more than others. For example,
that's correct.
In the case of medicine or law, you have to be certified. You have to go to that school. You have to receive that form of training. So, for example, those are some of the fields that really require a lot of formal education.
Yeah.
But, for example, I would like to talk about advertising. So, you might not have studied advertising, you might have studied a different major, but you might have a feel for advertising, you might have a talent for advertising, you might be able to come up with creative ideas and opinions, and you might prove yourself to the industry, you might sort of make connections. So, in some cases, I think it might work, but in a more structured context, in more formal and certified context, you stand almost no chance.
Yeah, I agree with that assessment. I think I would still, for the people listening, for the sake of argument and making this a valuable resource, I think I would still err on the side of caution and definitely go to university. So it's like, in terms of what I think about college education, it is extremely valuable and you have to have it. For professional reasons, for sure, you have to have it. And for cultural understanding and personal cultivation in general, it is a must-have. It's just, its contributions to your life are undeniable. It's like, if you haven't been to a situation where you are free to learn, free to live, and you're actually doing it out of your own volition, you're making that effort. It's a struggle. I mean, when
it is.
You go to university every day, you go on campus, you listen to lectures, you take notes, you come back, you do a lot of readings, you go to midterms, finals and stuff. It's like, it's not high school. It's there's a very clear line between the two experiences.
I think there is something we should mention here, and it's the fact that I think, again, I'll refer to the context of education and cross-cultural differences. So in the case of the US, I think the US education system places a lot of emphasis on individual learning and individualism and taking charge of your own learning. So starting with the primary school, the middle school, and the college, you're basically on your own. So you know that you have to take care of yourself. But in our system, so I think that's one of the eye-openers. So in our system, in primary school, in middle school, in high school, our parents or our teachers generally monitor us, try to help us, try to guide us. So there's always a helping hand. And in that case...
a support group, a support community.
Yeah, and in that case, you might not develop the ability or the urge to take charge of your own learning. So, for example, when I started college, and you might have a similar experience, I'm not sure, but I think you have a similar experience. So, when I started college, I was a little surprised because, like, I started Boğaziçi, like, for example, I would have classes, like, in the morning, in the afternoon, I would have a lot of free time, and that was great because, like, in high school, you have classes from early morning till late afternoon, and your whole day is full. You don't have anything else to do. I mean, you're not able to do anything else. But in college, you have a lot of free time. You can basically arrange your own schedule and do a lot of things. And you also you're not also monitored by anyone. Like, for example, you can skip a lot of classes and no one will care. For example, I used to skip a lot of German classes in my first and second term because I already had a basic understanding or foundation of German, so I could just take the exams. But then I realized, oh my God, there is no one watching. So you could go to classes, you could skip classes, you can fail classes, you can pass classes. No one really cares. Like, you are on your own, so you have to be in charge of your own learning. And
that's right.
In this context, I think it's something that we should mention with regards to the Turkish habits or the Turkish culture. So, but not all colleges are like this. For example, in Boğaziçi, I think there's a lot of freedom and flexibility. But I used to talk to students from other colleges or universities, and not every school is like that. So in some schools, like, the schedule is set, you cannot really change anything, and you're given a predefined program. So.
But that's a great point to make. That's a very important point to make. Even though, as you said, in some universities, the type of teaching and the type of learning that you get is an extension of the high school experience. However, still, the university experience is one that any person, venturing into adulthood should definitely have, because it's just a part of your growth as a human being. You mature through that experience.
I think that's a great point.
Yeah, if you don't have that experience, I think you will not be prepared for a lot of things in life, both professionally and socially and personally, in the way that you would have been prepared had you studied at university. So that's an important point.
Yeah, I think that's, like, once you mentioned it, like, the college education is a great transition into adulthood. So, like, right after high school, you're like a teenager, you're not really an adult.
Exactly.
And throughout the college, I think there is a gradual buildup of your maturity as you take classes, as you do teamwork, as you take maybe internships and take on new projects and explore new possibilities. It helps you grow both mentally, intellectually, and professionally. So it's a great transition to the adult world. And as you said, when you are certified or formally educated in a specific area, that sort of raises your esteem in the society.
Yeah, puts you in a different position.
It certainly does. So, and talking about this maturity, I think, for example, college education, if it's administered right, I mean, I can definitely say some colleges do a better job than others. So if it's administered correctly, it can be a huge advantage for students. For example, imagine this. We had public speaking classes at university, and I think it was such an advantage to have those classes because, I mean, up until that point, I didn't really have a lot of public speaking experience, and I think most people will agree with me on that because in high school you don't really focus on public speaking because you've got a lot of exams and tests to think about. So the public speaking class was a great starter.
Thank you, Nilgün Hoca.
Yeah, thank you. One day you might be listening to this episode, and we're grateful for what you've done for us. So that was great. And also, you might remember, I think we've taken that class together, like cross-cultural communication with Hicks. Did you take that class?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, we did it together.
So, like, for example, we had a class on cross-cultural communication with our lovely Canadian instructor, Martin Hicks, and we talked about how the East and West communicate different theories and theories on friendship, theories on enemies, and so on. And it was a great introduction to basically everything about communication and cultural differences. So it really helped me personally to understand the conflicts between nations.
I agree. You know, in terms of cultural studies, it was a great introduction course.
But it also had a lot of real life value for me.
That's
because,
right.
For example, one of the things I learned was that, well, I learned more than one thing, but so one of the things was that people have an innate urge to belong. So people want to belong to somewhere, to a group. So you can think of that at a national scale, but you can think of that at a local scale. For example, if you start a new school, you want to be friends with someone, with a group. You want to be in a circle. So you have that need to belong. And generally, in order to form a group identity, what happens is that you have to define an other. You have to alienate some other people so that you can draw the boundaries of your group. So you start making enemies. You start creating others around you, and that was an interesting insight. And I can see this all around me. So when you look at politics, when you look at social circles, when you look at the connections between the nations, I can see the implications of this approach everywhere.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think one of the benefits of that course was that Mr. Hicks was an expat, an expatriate, somebody who is not living in their country of origin, of their birth. So he was dealing with all of the things that he was talking about in the course. So he was an active participant in many of those things that he taught us. So he was somebody who believed in what he was saying, right? Because being a minority, for example, just as you said, you know, being the other, being us and being them, you know, you are put in these situations, maybe not every day, but for a lot of people, this is an everyday experience, but you're being put in these situations throughout your life. And you approach them in different ways. Sometimes you are in this we camp, in this us camp, and sometimes in this them camp. And you find yourself behaving and thinking in very different ways. So it was a great, way to start the conversation. For us.
Well, I will again go back to the topic of sort of taking charge of your learning, taking initiative for your own learning. So in college, you have to learn how to be an individual. You have to start taking responsibility for your life, for your learning. And I think in this case, we all have room for improvement. So for example, generally when students start college, they don't really think about taking responsibility for their life, for their learning. So, for example, there will of course be some great classes at college, but there will also be classes that you will not fully enjoy, or there will be classes that you might want to escape from. So, and in those cases, and as I said, you will have a lot of extra time, free time compared to like high school. So in those cases, it's a great opportunity to sort of take responsibility for your own learning and take part in projects, extracurricular activities, or simply register for an online course or attend a course outside of your school. Like do something, do an internship, maybe start experimenting with different business ideas. Just do something that will help you grow, both personally and professionally. Because, you know, sometimes we focus too much on academic issues. We might lose touch with the real life. But then you might feel great at school, but at the end of the day, you will go outside of the bounds of the school. You'll mix with real people outside of the school. So you have to develop skills and expertise that can help you in real life. And in those cases, I think it's very important to take responsibility for your own learning and spend time working on things that are not necessarily related to college, but that might help you advance in your life and career.
I agree. I think it's a good idea maybe to branch out the discussion and talk about the international context more often, because it is clear that in both of our minds, and also in, you know, looking at it from a relatively objective point of view, I think it is clear that the pros of having college education in Turkey will almost always outweigh the cons, and outweigh in a way that is so overwhelming that it is even hard to talk about any cons.
But I've got this question for you. So, like, we're saying this, we're coming to this conclusion based on our experience with a very specific school, with a very specific and prestigious school. But for example, like, I'm not sure if I would have the same idea if I went to an average school with an average education. So if I went to an average college, would I have the same idea? Would I have the same belief? Would I really believe in the value of college education? So that's a question that I am really curious about.
You're definitely right to be curious about. I mean, I agree with this question in the sense that your life experience is definitely going to be different if you go to a different school, if you choose a different career path. You know, it all depends. As you just said, you know, if you choose a career where formal education is just structurally obligatory, like there is no way out. If you want to get into the system, you're going to have to go through this production line.
Yeah.
If you go to a place like that, just like medicine or law, then it's going to be different. If you go to a different career path, if you choose, like if you go to journalism, for example, there's still some leeway. Like you can be a journalist if you started out really early, and even without education, like you maybe you were writing at the high school journal, and then you became the head writer, maybe the editor, and then you go to university and you're studying at a completely different thing. But then you realize that you have this passion for writing and interviews and talking to people, and then you choose a different path. So that's possible. So it's like it all depends. I totally would agree with that. But considering everything that we talked about, and it's really hard to mature in Turkey. I mean, we have to, it's really hard because we are always in a close-knit community of people, even though you might be really individualistically you might be somebody who have the tendency to become an individual. I want my freedom, I want my private space. Even if you're that type of a person, it is really hard to grow up in Turkey because you have to take responsibility to grow up, and taking responsibility is something that comes really late in your life in Turkey. You're 18, you're legally an adult, and you're nowhere near an adult. Like, I don't know how it turns out in the later generations. I mean, I have a brother who's like growing up, and I'm not going to expose him here, but everybody struggles with things like adolescents have like serious problems, and it's not easy. It's not easy to become an adult. It's not easy to become a father or a mother. So it's not easy to become a professional. You have to, if you want to develop these skills, university is a must. If you don't, some people develop them in different ways, though. That's another option. If you have a family business, you're trading. You're involved in some kind of business.
Whether you like it or not, you'll become a part of it.
Exactly. And then you can chart your own way. That's a different story.
Yeah.
But, if you have no capital and no family business, like the rest of Turkey, like a lot of people don't, then you're going to struggle for it. And university is the way to go for that.
Well, I think when it comes to the discussion on the worthiness or the value of college education, most people really refer to a couple of famous examples. So, people say, Bill Gates, he became the wealthiest man on earth, and he is not a college graduate. He dropped out of Harvard. And then they say, well, look at Mark Zuckerberg, he founded Facebook, he became a billionaire and a very successful businessman, and he also dropped out of Harvard. And then, there are a couple of people like that, and most people really refer to their stories. But the thing is, in my opinion, if you're smart enough to get into Harvard, and if you are smart enough to complete a couple of years, you have a high chance of achieving something great in life. Because
you've already proven something.
Yeah, you've already proven something. It's not the fact that these people dropped out of college wasn't because they were lazy or they didn't see the value in it.
Exactly.
They were successful, they were smart, and they were doing fine, but then they started something much bigger, which had a lot more potential, and they chose to go in that path.
Yeah, they took a huge risk as well at the same time. But we have to also, I think, acknowledge here that they are in the extreme minority.
That is true.
I don't think Harvard is going to have thousands of dropouts because somebody dropped out and became a billionaire. Even those guys, they're not going to take that kind of risk because, they're in the minority. And a lot of people, also we have to talk about this, I think. It's you can be a billionaire, right? And you can be a millionaire. And if we're talking dollar terms, your lifestyle is not going to change that much.
That is true.
And your ability to use free time, your ability to care for people around you, I think you might even have a better chance if you're a millionaire rather than a billionaire. Because if you're a billionaire, your money will always preoccupy you in one form or another. Because your business. Think about Elon Musk, for example. There is no English Hour podcast without an Elon Musk reference, right? So, that guy, he just said he was in an interview, I think, and he said he was sleeping on the factory floor. And he says I don't even have to have time to go home and shower. And he's exerting incredible effort right now because his company is in a lot of problems. Tesla is,
they call it production
bleeding money.
Hell.
Yeah. And and he feels like he has to do it, and he's he doesn't have any family in the picture right now. He has 5 or 6 kids. Yeah, exactly. It's hard. It's hard on those kids. So
for sure.
There are a lot of things going on. So if we think about these terms, and then go back to Harvard, for example, Harvard produces a lot of millionaires every year, and those guys are not dropouts. They've finished college and they've moved on to better and bigger things.
Yeah.
And they're perfectly fine.
And I think one of the great examples is Jeff Bezos, because I think he's a man who completed his formal training and then he worked at prestigious, I think he worked in investment banking or finance.
That's
so
right.
he had a career in finance, so he was doing really fine. And then, like, I think in his 30s or 40s, he started Amazon, and right now Amazon is one of the greatest companies on earth. Like, they process millions of dollars in sales each and every day. So
That's right.
So, like, Jeff Bezos is someone who, as I said, completed formal training and went on to like create something great. So, I mean, I think it's not necessarily about like dropping out of college or completing college. So, in order to be successful in life, you have to gain or develop some abilities, some skills.
That's
and generally college is a good way to develop those skills, but if you're able to develop those skills and connections outside of the college, well, then you have a shot at becoming successful.
I would agree with that, yeah.
So I think we mostly talk about the advantages of college education.
Yeah.
So what are the cons? What are the disadvantages? Like, we can talk about the Turkish context and the US or the international context, because as we said at the very beginning, they're very different because there are radically different landscapes, like when it comes to the financial aspects, when it comes to the approach of the society and everything. So we can first talk about the college education in Turkey, like the disadvantages of college education in Turkey. So what do you personally think are the disadvantages of college education in Turkey?
I mean, the problem with college education in Turkey, the problems, I think they stem mostly from the system itself. So, I mean, both the good, the benefit, and the disadvantages are built right into the system. So, I think the problems are mostly structural problems. We have a problem of teaching the teacher in Turkey, educating the teacher. And we have not been able to resolve this, and we don't seem to have the ability to do this anytime soon. We have to change the way we approach education in Turkey in general, not just colleges. But colleges suffer the most because we bring all of these people in, we admit all of these people into colleges, and we realize, okay, we haven't been really equipping them with the right set of tools up to this point, and now we expect them to perform at a level that they really have difficulty in achieving, and then we force them into doing that, and then we push them into the market. It's like, it's a huge problem. I mean, we don't have the kind of skills that we need in high school, in university students right now.
Yeah.
They're not ready for, I mean, you can't talk about everybody, of course, but we either put too much pressure on them in terms of like expectations, or we don't feed enough, like in the right type of and right dose of information, so that they can really, imbibe them and internalize them. It's like, it's either too much, sometimes there's like too much going on, or there's too little going on. And then you can guess the spectrum here. Like, in different regions of Turkey, we have different standards for universities. Yeah. And in some cases, there's like little going on in the university, like no projects, no laboratories, no experiments going on, no international seminars, no participations from the university to any international seminar.
Yeah.
We're not hosting anything. So, like, there's very little going on. So we can't really give our students that university experience.
That is true.
That is a problem. And in some other cases, some of the universities in Turkey are almost like an extension of the professional market. Like, it's almost like companies representatives from companies are gonna flood the campus and then look for talent everywhere. It's like they're basically scouting for talent.
Yeah.
And then the problem that I see with that is the professional aspect is so emphasized that they're not really thinking at university. It's like they're not tinkering with ideas and philosophies. And it's like, I remember you saying, for example, going into this learning sciences PhD programs test, this entrance exam. You were very impressed with the way they put together the test, and I was really happy with the way you approached it, because you said I was already aware of or like familiar with the paradigms of learning. You said like cognitivism, connectivism, and structuralism. All of these things already existed in your mind as schemes, and you were aware of what each meant in relation to the other, and even maybe the historical progression of human thought. So you were already aware of what's going on. It doesn't matter you're studying learning sciences or like maybe sociology, or even if you go into literature, you're going to see the same things. So it's like you knew what was going on because you were taught in that, because you were exposed to those ideas at university and at master's.
Yeah.
So both university. So that is key. But some people are not getting that because of this professional emphasis. So it's like it's a hodgepodge. I mean, there are a lot of problems to talk about.
That is true. I mean, I think I'll talk in simpler terms. So John Berg gave us a very abstract and very sort of framework-related approach to the problems in education, which is great. So I'll just talk in layman's terms. So I think one of the major problems, especially with the increase in population and the opening up of new universities, is that I think there is a lack of skilled teachers and staff. So, for example, even at Boğaziçi, I mean, I personally had great classes, but then I had classes I suffered from. Like, I simply hated some classes. Like, I really counted the minutes, the seconds in some classes, because they were like a form of torture. I had to endure it because I had to attend the class was horrible. So I had that experience, but I also had classes that I could sit all day long because they were great. So, I mean, fortunately, the proportion of bad classes or unenjoyable classes to the enjoyable classes wasn't high. So there was a small proportion of bad classes, or bad apples, I call them. But then, I mean, in many schools, in many institutions, I think there's a lack of skilled teachers, professors, instructors that can really inspire and guide their students, because I think education starts with the teacher, because teacher is the guide. Okay, the student will do something, will think, will do research, will read, will write, will think, but the instructor in many cases is the trailblazer, like the guide that sets the path, or at least shows the signs for students to follow. So I think one of the biggest challenges is really finding the right people and putting them in the right positions. And that's something you mentioned at the beginning of your take on this matter.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, you have a much longer, I think, experience with this, because you yourself is you're a teacher, and even though you didn't study teaching, you majored in translation and interpreting, but I think you were teaching when you were studying.
I was a research assistant.
You were a research assistant.
I was teaching undergrad students.
Yeah, you were both an academic, and you were also engaged with people, in terms of teaching English. And I think, this is the kind of grassroots education coupled with rigorous intellectual learning that we need in our teachers. And we need good teachers to have good students, that's for sure.
That is true.
And having good students is part of an important part of college education. But at the same time, I think another thing we can talk about, in terms of the cons or negative sides of college education, is that there has been an inflation of college education, I think.
Yeah.
Because the university entrance exam has always haunted people. It's an experience in Turkish psyche.
Yeah.
Everybody goes through it, and success at the university entrance exam is perceived and promoted, it's touted as key to success throughout your life.
That is true.
Basically, like, if you get this one, like, you're set. You're
For
good.
life.
Yeah, exactly. And that attitude, that psychology, I think, has a lot to do with how we build up and structure the rest of our education and professional career. There's like such a strong emphasis on that we miss out on certain things afterwards, unfortunately. And one reason why, it is a problem, this emphasis is a problem, is that because people associate success at the university entrance exam with success in life, governments and, the state, the Turkish state, has decided to open up new universities, which is great. It's excellent. And admit more students. So there's a greater percentage of the test takers at the university entrance exam that are able to go to university now than before. So it's good news, right? It's great. Yeah. But unfortunately,
if you can educate them properly.
That's right. It's almost like family planning. Like, you're gonna have children. You can have 1, 2, 3, maybe even more. But how are you gonna deal with them? Like, even having one child is so much responsibility. And you are such an all-important figure in their lives. You have to be a good person. You have to take care of them. You have to plan for their future. And then if these are like 2 children, it's a whole different game. 3, maybe even so. Just like that, you expect more students to finish university and be a part of the workforce, and at the same time be successful individuals and citizens. How are we going to do that? That's the challenge. Just opening up universities it's just the beginning, and you have to do so much more for the infrastructure.
But I mean, the thing is, things can improve over the long term. So, for example, I think it's part of our mentality. We don't start things great. So we start something and then we improvise and we try to make it better over the years. So there's a lot of patching up.
That's right. Yeah, I agree with that.
I mean, I think that's one of the approaches that our nation takes. For example, when it comes to municipality and the infrastructure, the road, right? Before each election, the roads are paved again, like they're dug up and then paved again. So, like, things happen again and again and again. They're not really planned out in detail at the outset. So, I think a similar thing is playing out in the case of universities. So, the universities are being opened up, and maybe they're not perfectly planned. Well, perfectly is sort of an exaggeration. So, but then maybe over time things will settle. There will be a better system, better students, better instructors. But then in that time frame, I think we might be sacrificing several generations because we're basically experimenting on those people. That's right.
And you know what? Some of those people could be much better at other professions, other skills. And if they, take those paths, it would be better for their professional lives, and also it will be better for the workforce, because if you increase the number of university students, that ipso facto, that means that you're making a decision in terms of how many people you want to hire in every specific profession, right?
Sure.
So you are basically saying that I need more doctors, I need more engineers of all kinds, like construction, more engineers in like physics, more engineers in industry, like industry engineers and everything else. So you need more lawyers, you need more teachers, you need more of everybody, which is true because we are a growing nation. You need more of each and every one of those professions. However, if the total number is not going to change, this also means you have less farmers. This also means you have less barbers, you have less like shoemakers, you have less, like everything else is going to be less. And I'm not saying that any one of these professions is lesser than the other. I'm just saying that if you want to educate them and prepare them for a role, you're sacrificing another role in the workforce and in society, and you're going to have to think about those things.
I mean, there has to be an equal distribution across industries, across professions. Like, everyone can't be a doctor, and I think everyone
should not be.
Yeah, shouldn't be a doctor. Like, because we need different professions. And the thing is, I think people have general like inclinations or skills that gear them towards a specific job, and if this inclination is directed or channeled in the right way, then we can probably raise skilled people in every profession.
Yeah, your words have reminded me of an important disadvantage of Turkish higher education system, which is sports. Like in the United States, just as we gave an example before, we can again talk about that, or maybe in Europe, in other parts of the world, sports is an integral part of university education. And if you are good at sports, you can even get admitted by a university just on the merit of your sports excellence, sports ability.
Scholarships.
That's right. You can get scholarships from a lot of prestigious universities.
You know what? You can even get scholarships for music and arts.
That's right. That's also true. Music and arts, that's also another important part of the equation. And we don't have these things in Turkey. Like, you're not going to go to university by playing football. That's for sure. That's like, it's perceived as totally different paths, but it shouldn't be that way. I mean, think about that. Like, you go on campus, right?
Yeah.
Every time I go on campus, I feel like learning something new. It's just, I don't know if it is conditioned into me because of how many times I've been there, but it's like, it gives me that feeling right away.
Yeah.
And I think I'm confident that a football player, an amateur football player or a basketball player at the age of 18, 19, 20 would have the same feeling, even more intensely maybe because of their curiosity, when they go on campus. And
Sure.
even though they will continue their training, they can on the side get proper education, high school education, high level learning in psychology, which is like key. It's so important. In international relations and political science, in philosophy, they can do so many things, in so many different directions. It would be awesome.
Yeah.
To have these people, representing sports, because sports personalities are really, really important in Turkey, and a lot of them are foreign. We don't have Turkish sports heroes anymore.
Yeah.
And that's a shame.
What a pity.
Yeah.
Well, I think we should wrap things up. And I mean, the central theme of today's talk was the importance, the value of college education, and the pros and cons associated with college education. So let's basically wrap things up by giving our overviews or like personal summaries of what we think about college education, pros and cons, and some future maybe directions or suggestions. So you go first.
College education is important and there's no substitute for it. I think both in Turkey and in both in Turkey and abroad, even in discussions, whether college education is worth it or not. We mentioned the United States, for example. Even those guys, young Americans, when they have these discussions, they tell themselves college education is something that you're not going to have a substitute for in your life. If you forego college education, you're not going to get that feeling, that experience anywhere in your life. And they recognize that when they start out. So it's an experience that I think any person, any human being should have. So that's one thing. But at the same time, there are some downsides to it. That's obvious. If you have to pay a lot of money for it, if finances are involved, then you're going to have to make the decision about that. If you can find other ways of getting that experience in your communities, in your societies, and if you can avoid paying all that money and maybe investing that in some other venture, that is fine. That's perfectly fine. If you can, even in high school, you might be able to, go into clubs, socialize in a way that you would socialize at university, maybe even meet inspirational teachers and mentors and other people in your life that will direct you professionally and academically, then, you're getting something that belongs to a college education, and you should be happy about that,
Yeah.
And if you have to avoid some of these things, like as we mentioned, paying a lot of money for it, then you can do that. And that's a lot of time as well, by the way. We're talking at least 4 years of your time, and of your time, best time of your life, basically. So if you want to spend that on something else, that's another choice. Like if you want to build a family, for example, if you have the maturity to do that, 20s are a perfect time to do that. So you can be friends with your children when they grow up. Like when they are 20, you're going to be just 40, which is great, right? So that's that. So basically, I think it's important. I think for the majority of our listeners and for the majority of humanity, it's a great experience. And I think going forward, it's going to be even more important. Because if this is going to be the way we're going to be trained cognitively and intellectually and culturally, then we're going to have to spend these 15, 20 years of our time educating ourselves. There's no way around it. And if this is going to be the way forward, then college education is definitely going to be there.
Yeah, I think that's been a very comprehensive summary. Well, personally, I think that college education has a profound impact on a person's character, career, both academic career and professional career. And I think most of the cons associated with college education can be avoided if you are really conscious about your learning and if you take responsibility for your life. So college education is, I think, valuable because it can really equip you with both academic skills and personal skills, such as problem solving, creativity, group work, networking with other great people, and having in-depth discussions both in your field and in other fields. But of course, as I mentioned, there are cons. So from my point of view, so one of the biggest downsides is that you don't get a lot of practical experience in college. And in order to avoid that, you can be very conscious. You can take internships. You can maybe start something on your own. You can practice with different ideas. You can attend a lot of extracurricular activities. For example, when I was an undergrad, I was an ambassador in 2010, and Istanbul was the European capital of culture. I was an ambassador. I was attending events, and I was talking to tourists. I was giving surveys and so on. So that was a great experience. Or I think in each summer I did an internship or I did a trip, And they were all very helpful. And in my free time, I was always trying to learn something new, a new skill that was not taught at school, because I knew that they would matter in real life. And I would really suggest that when you are in college, talk to people in your area of interest. Talk to professionals in your area of interest. Work with them, see what they're doing, see what skills they use or need, and try to cultivate those skills. And in that way, you can both improve your theoretical background and prepare yourself for the future by building a very solid foundation. So, as I said, you can have the best of both worlds if you are deliberate about it. And I think if you are transitioning into maturity, you have to start being deliberate about the way you live your life, because each and every day is time that is passing by that you cannot take back. So that's my take on it.
I was happy to be listening to it live, and then I really enjoyed this podcast. I think it was much longer than our usual length, right?
Yeah, I think it's close to the initial episodes with regards to the length.
Yeah.
But
Which is fine.
Yeah, the thing is, like, some of our listenings are asking for longer episodes because they're like, well, if you've got time, please talk more, because we enjoy listening to you. So I think this is one of the episodes that will please those people. So we love you guys. Okay, so that's it for now, and we'll see you in the next episode. Bye.